In the chilling year of 1901, whispers of a dark secret echoed through the streets of Poitiers, France. An anonymous tip hinted at a nightmare hidden behind the opulent facade of an aristocrat's home. Driven by an unshakable curiosity, the authorities took action, dispatching officers to investigate the unsettling claims of a woman imprisoned within those very walls. What they discovered was a scene that would haunt them forever. Behind a locked door lay a pitch-black attic, where the air was thick with a stench so vile that it clawed at their throats. As the officers forced the door open, a terrifying sight awaited them. A frail, skeletal figure, Blanche Monnier, lay huddled on a straw mattress, trapped in a hell of her mother's making for a staggering 25 years. At just 55 pounds, Blanche was a ghost of her former self, surrounded by decay. Insects crawled across the rotting food that littered the floor, a grim testament to her prolonged suffering. The horror of her existence was palpable, a living nightmare sealed away from the world. The officers recoiled at the overwhelming odor, struggling to maintain their composure as they realized the extent of the darkness they had uncovered. Who could be so cruel? How could a mother do this? Blanche's story was not just one of confinement, it was a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity, a secret that had festered in the shadows for far too long. During the bleak days of Victorian England, life was fragile, disease ran rampant, and medical science was still in its infancy. For many, death arrived far too soon. In a time where survival beyond childhood was uncertain, parents often watched their little ones fall victim to illnesses for which there was no cure. Photography in those days was a rare and expensive luxury. Most families never captured the faces of their children while they lived. There was no family album, no cherished snapshot. But in death came their first portrait. In the shadow of grief, mourning parents would dress their departed children in their finest clothes, positioning them with care. The lifeless body was propped upright, their eyes sometimes held open, giving the illusion of life. An eerie silence would fill the room as the photographer captured their stillness, an image both heartbreaking and unsettling. These photographs, known as post-mortem portraits, were often the first and only images ever taken of the child, a keepsake for the family to cling to in their sorrow. Yet behind every glassy-eyed stare, behind every hauntingly peaceful pose, lay the chilling truth. These were not pictures of life, but a final record of death. It was in these quiet, unsettling moments that the line between life and death blurred, where the living clung to the dead, hoping to preserve a fleeting memory. But the result was something far more chilling. Portraits of the departed, frozen in time, forever staring back into the world they'd left behind. Anneliese Michel was a deeply religious teenager, living a quiet, devout life with her family in a small German town in the late 1960s. But something dark was stirring beneath the surface, something that would soon shatter her peaceful existence. It began with strange blackouts at school, moments of confusion where time itself seemed to slip away. But those moments soon spiraled into something far more terrifying. Anneliese began to experience violent convulsions, nightmarish hallucinations, and behaviors that could only be described as disturbing, unnatural. She would gnash her teeth, contort her body, and scream in voices that weren't her own. Soon she was devouring spiders and, even worse, drinking her own urine as if under the control of something malevolent. Terrified and desperate, Anneliese claimed that demons had taken hold of her soul. She insisted she was possessed by the devil himself. Her deeply religious parents believed her, and they sought help not from doctors but from the church. Over the course of the next 10 months, Anneliese would endure a horrifying ordeal. 67 exorcisms were performed, each session more brutal than the last. She was tied down, forced to endure prayers, rituals, and relentless attempts to drive the evil from her body. But with each exorcism, her condition worsened. She stopped eating, refused medical help, and fell deeper into the darkness. By the time it was over, Anneliese Michel, once a healthy young woman, had wasted away, her body frail and broken. She died in 1976 at just 23 years old, weighing a mere 68 pounds, her spirit consumed by suffering. Her death shocked the world. Was she truly possessed, or was she failed by those meant to protect her? To this day, her story remains one of the most haunting and disturbing cases of supposed possession, raising chilling questions about faith, fear, and the thin line between sanity and madness. On a quiet morning in St. Petersburg, Florida, July 2, 1951, something strange and horrific took place. Mary Reeser, an elderly woman, lived alone in her small apartment. Her landlady, making a routine visit to deliver a telegram, approached the door but immediately sensed something was wrong. The door felt warm, unnaturally warm to the touch. As she opened it, she stepped into a scene straight out of a nightmare. Inside the apartment, nearly untouched by fire, lay a bizarre and horrifying sight. Where Mary Reeser had once sat, only ashes remained, her body almost entirely reduced to dust. A single charred fragment of her left leg was all that was left intact, along with her skull, grotesquely shrunken, as though exposed to intense, unearthly heat. The chair she had been sitting in was burned to the frame, yet the rest of the room was eerily undamaged. Local investigators were stunned. There was no evidence of a conventional fire, no signs of an accelerant, and no apparent source of the blaze. Puzzled and without answers, they sent the case to the FBI. The FBI concluded that Reeser had burned in an extremely rare and baffling phenomenon, where the human body seemed to act like a candle, a slow, intense burn fueled by the body's own fat. But even they couldn't explain how the fire had started or why it consumed her so completely, while the rest of the apartment remained largely untouched. Rumors spread, and whispers of spontaneous human combustion grew louder. Had Mary Reeser fallen victim to a terrifying and unexplained force that ignited from within? To this day, the cause of her death remains a chilling mystery, a bizarre and unsettling case where science meets the unknown. On a dark night in November 1985, the peaceful village of Armoro, Colombia, was suddenly overtaken by a terrifying force. A volcanic eruption sent a deadly wave of mud and debris crashing through the streets, destroying everything in its path. Among the wreckage was 13-year-old Omera Sanchez, trapped in the ruins of her own home, her body pinned beneath the rubble. Only her head and arms remained above the murky waters that now surrounded her. For nearly 3 agonizing days, Omera fought to survive, her fragile body slowly being overtaken by infection and the biting cold. Rescuers, standing mere feet away, tried desperately to free her but were powerless against the overwhelming force of nature. They watched in horror as Omera's condition worsened, unable to stop the inevitable. On the final day, November 16th, her strength gave out. Just before she succumbed, a haunting photograph was taken by Frank Fournier, capturing the young girl's face, filled with a haunting mix of fear, acceptance, and unimaginable courage as death drew near. Fournier later recalled the helplessness he felt as he witnessed her final moments. Her tragic story remains a chilling reminder of the unstoppable power of nature and the frailty of human life. On a chilling night in November 1974, the quiet town of Amityville was shaken by an act of unimaginable horror. Inside a seemingly peaceful home, Ronald DeFeo Jr. moved through the darkened halls, armed with a .35 caliber rifle. Room by room, he unleashed his deadly rage on his sleeping family, his parents and 4 innocent siblings. The sound of gunfire echoed through the house, but no one came to their aid. By morning, the once warm and loving home had become a tomb, bathed in the cold silence of death. What led DeFeo to commit such a heinous act? Some believe it was more than mere madness. They say the house itself whispered to him, its very walls alive with dark energies, urging him to kill. DeFeo later claimed he heard voices, unearthly voices, beckoning him to slaughter his own flesh and blood. Whether these voices were born from his fractured mind or something far more sinister remains a chilling mystery to this day. After the massacre, the house took on a life of its own. Strange occurrences and haunting tales began to emerge from those who dared to step inside. Shadows moved where there was no light, eerie whispers floated through the air, and a heavy sense of dread clung to every corner. The Amityville house had become more than just a scene of murder. It had become a gateway to something dark and unknowable. For years, those who lived there recounted stories of paranormal activity, sparking a fascination with the house's terrifying history. While skeptics dismissed these accounts as fabrication or mass hysteria, others couldn't shake the feeling that something evil remained trapped within those walls. The legend of the Amityville house grew, inspiring books, movies, and endless speculation about what truly transpired in that cursed home. Though time has passed, the question still lingers. Was Ronald DeFeo driven by a darkness lurking within himself, or was there something far more terrifying at play? Whatever the answer, the blood-stained legacy of the Amityville house endures, an eternal reminder of a night when unspeakable evil came to life. On a cold winter night in 1945, a horrifying message was discovered, smeared in lipstick across the wall of a Chicago apartment. For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." The words dripped with desperation, left behind by a man consumed by darkness. Moments before writing that haunting plea, William Aarons had mercilessly ended the life of Frances Brown, leaving her lifeless body sprawled on the floor with a knife lodged in her throat. The killer's message was not a confession, it was a warning, a chilling cry for help from a man spiraling into madness. Aarons would go on to claim one more victim, terrorizing the city with his brutal acts before the authorities finally brought his reign of terror to an end 6 months later. By then, his name had become infamous, the Lipstick Killer. But what made him write those words? Was it guilt, fear, or something far more sinister driving his uncontrollable urges? To this day, the twisted message left in Lipstick remains etched in history, a disturbing reminder of the mind behind the murders. It was not just a note, it was a glimpse into the soul of a killer begging to be stopped, even as he gave in to the darkness within. In the year 1647, beneath the shadow of an ancient cathedral in Venzone, Italy, a group of laborers unearthed something that would chill them to the bone. As they worked on the church grounds, they uncovered a tomb buried deep in the earth. Inside, they discovered the desiccated remains of a man, eerily intact. His body, though reduced to a mere 33 pounds, had not rotted away like one might expect. Instead, his skin clung to his bones like aged parchment, dry and shriveled but unmistakably human, almost as if death had touched him, but refused to consume him entirely. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. Over the years, more of these haunting figures surfaced, their bodies similarly preserved, as if time itself had forgotten them. For centuries, locals whispered about these strange mummies, wondering what dark secret allowed them to defy nature's usual course of decay. Scholars were equally perplexed, and for a long time, no one could offer a clear explanation. In the early 20th century, a theory arose, one that suggested a peculiar fungus had a hand in the unnatural preservation. But even that explanation felt inadequate, as more research hinted at a deeper, more sinister reason. Some believed the soil beneath the town held unusual properties, or perhaps it was the water that ran beneath Venzone that held the key to this unsettling phenomenon. Yet, despite these theories, the mummies remain a mystery, silent and shriveled witnesses to something long forgotten, waiting beneath the earth as if guarding secrets from a time long past. Even today, as people walk through the streets of Venzone, they can't help but feel the weight of those unknowns pressing down, the lingering question of what really keeps these bodies frozen in time. The truth, whatever it may be, seems determined to stay buried with the dead.